Hello, thanks. Welcome to the next frequently asked questions session of 5th edition D&D. This session, I'm going to address some questions about the Adventure Day. The previous video dealt with CR and encounter building. And in this one, I'm going to actually incorporate some parts of that because these two things go together well. So the specific questions I intend to answer over the next 15 minutes or so is what is the Adventure Day, how to build the Adventure Day and why it's important, and then how, if you're a DM who's having trouble with the Adventure Day, what are my recommendations? So the Adventure Day is this idea in 5th edition that the player characters should encounter many challenges, and in particular, it is combat encounters, which before they take a long rest, and then even probably should only have a couple of short rests over the course of the day. It comes up a lot. People are like, "Oh, well, no, it doesn't have to be combat encounters," and that is contrary to the actual rules written. The actual rules in the Adventure Day description specifically says that player or characters should be able to overcome 6 or more medium or hard encounters without a long rest, and then if they're encountering easy encounters, they should be able to overcome more. If they are experiencing deadly encounters, it should be less. And the only place that those terms are used, easy, medium, and hard, is in regard specifically to combat encounters. They are also used in regards to skill checks, but that's clearly not applicable here. So there's no such thing as a hard role-playing interaction or a hard skill challenge, right? That those terms are reserved for combat encounters. So the rules as written is specifically addressing combat encounters. So having said that, I think that was probably an oversight on the author's point, because there's a big section on traps in the DMG, and traps clearly consume resources, and probably if they had it to do over again, considering what they know now, I would guess that the writers would change that phrasing, and I will get into that more in a few minutes. So the idea of the Adventure Day is dramatically different from previous editions. And if you are a longtime DM, it is probably a big adjustment, and you may have just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to shove 6 encounters into a single session. In previous editions, like if you were a writer or DM in 3.5 and you were stacking more than a couple of encounters without the opportunity for PCs to take a big recovery time, you were kind of considered an ass. It was considered a pretty dickish thing to stack multiple encounters back to back without considering how hard that would be, and if you were writing at 3.5. And so it's radically different. And it also dramatically restructures the entire narrative of adventures. In previous editions, an adventure would cover a span pretty typically of a week. So in a 4-hour session, the activity you're covering is a week. And then over the course of that week, you would have certain events that would occur. And they would kind of occur independent of each other in relation to time. I mean, there would be almost always there would be a plot line connecting them. But in 5th edition, we completely changed that dynamic, right? So now we have if you're still playing you still adhere to the model of a 4-hour session being a week's worth of game time, which is pretty good. I vary from that from time to time in my dim guard adventures. Sometimes adventures will stack back to back, and they may cover consecutive days if they're part of a story arc, but that's still fairly typical from most of the adventures that I've read. If you look at even things like Hoard of the Dragon Queen, I mean that some sessions will cover a month there. But anyway, the point is, in 5th edition, you have an indefinite period of time, right? You have an indefinite period of time that your adventure is going to cover. And the key point is that for an adventure within that indefinite period of time, which we can call a campaign if we want to, or a story arc if you're not, if you're only looking at 3 or 4 related adventures. But in the course of that adventure, there's going to be a very important day, right? So there's going to be a very important day when just the crap blows up, man. Just all sorts of fireworks occur. The assassins come out of the woodwork. The undead come storming out of the sewers. I mean, that day is the day, right? And it really changes the way you have to structure your narratives when you are designing your adventures. You have to have, in particular, you have to have reasons that those all occur at the same time. So, for example, the PCs are under the surveillance of one group of bad guys who I don't think we can take them. But then suddenly these group of wandering creatures, dire wolves attack them or undead attack them. And now then the people who have them under surveillance says, oh yeah, well now that they're looking a little wicked, now is our time to strike, right? So now then you have a reason why these guys are attacking back to back. And then you've got, it is an exercise in creativity to string together enough of those to make an adventure. But it can be done, the adventure that I just ran today, you had orcs have moved into this area, and then the PCs and then another orc tribe is trying to hook up with them, and the PCs are trying to stop it. So, and then there's an unseen bad guy who's actually engineering the entire alliance. So, I mean, the PCs go into, and it was a fairly straightforward. It didn't involve a lot of manipulation on my part at all to engineer that. There was a wandering monster encounter. There was a picket from the waiting tribe. Then the other orcs vanguard force comes in, and then having hurt his plans so much, the unseen bad guy sends in his minions to try and deal with the PCs. So I mean, the timing all made sense. The location all made sense. It wasn't, and that's what you have to do in the adventure day. There are several things that pose problems with this, however. The first one is narratively, right? It requires a great deal of adjustment to the way most of the M's are used to engineering their adventures, right? You don't have that leisurely stroll through a week or 10 days of game time, right? You have to very much focus in on that one particular important day. Now, I have found that once you make that adjustment, it actually makes for a much more exciting session, right? You don't have these sort of, we do this and then we recover, you do this and then we recover. It's much more of a building. It's like, oh, okay, well, that was hard, but now we can take a little bit of short rest. Oh my gosh, here they come again. Oh, this is going to be even harder because I don't have all the resources. And then by the time you get to that final encounter of the day, the spell slots are spent. The hit dice have all been used. You probably use several consumables along the way. So, and it's so in the final encounter today, there were 4 PCs. 2 of them wound up dead. That's another topic. I'll probably do that. But in 5th edition, death is not nearly as severe an occurrence as in previous edition. In this particular case, they were only dead for a couple minutes, and then the cleric revivified them. And there's no consequence as in previous editions, where if you were raised, you lost a level and it cost a huge amount of money. In fifth edition, there's really not a lot to spend your money on, and coming back from death seems to be a fairly easy thing to achieve. So anyway, that's a topic for a different story. Moving on. So so that's the first thing. Is you have to dramatically adjust your narrative from this week to this very important day. The second thing is you need to make sure that you have reasonable impediments to taking a long rest. Why can't the PCs decide, oh, okay, we're going to camp out for the night? There's got to be an environmental reason. They're in hostile territory. They're going to keep, if they try to take a long rest, they're going to keep getting attacked. Or there is a time impetus. If they don't achieve this goal by the next morning, then various bad things are going to happen. Are the two most common ones that I've found. There are probably some others that I haven't thought of, but those are good. So those that's the second problem. The biggest problem, the largest problem that I have encountered with the Adventure Day is I run 4-hour sessions, and that's very common. That comes from the convention culture mainly. And then just the nature of gaming going back to the 70s, right? Where you get together with your friends around 6 or 7, we'll play till 10 or 11, then we'll go home and go to sleep. So getting in 6+ medium and hard combat encounters in 4 hours is just not doable. It just cannot be done. It's interesting. A 5th edition combat encounter will run almost always less than 3, but will be done by the end of round 3. However, those 3 rounds, even with only 4 PCs, it's going to take 30 minutes or more with setup and recovery especially. So if you're running 6 medium to hard encounters, all you're doing is moving from one combat to another. There's no time for role playing or narration or character development, any of the broader, richer stuff that really is the strength of D&D. If you're just looking for a tactical combat game, Warhammer 40K is a much stronger choice for just tabletop tactical combat. But so then, what do we do? What do we do to overcome these problems? Well, the first one is actually quite easy, and they have a mechanic built into it, and that is called the gritty realism resting option. It's in the DMG, and just very briefly, it changes a short rest to an overnight rest, and then a long rest to you have to take a week off, and this fixes all those narrative problems with your narration. Now you're back to you have a week, and then you can have a couple of encounters each day, and you're still fulfilling the requirements of that Adventure Day. The only thing that gets skewed there are resources that recharge daily, like wand recharges, which wands probably aren't going to be a big part of your campaign. But so that's not going to heavily skew things. So your CR and XP budgets are going to be valid. Your narrative is going to be much more comfortable with what you have been doing since the red box, right? You can go back to that week to 10 day of story with a couple of encounters every day, or on 6 days. But that does not address the problem of getting the 6+ into the 4-hour session, which is really the big problem with the Adventure Day that I have found amongst DMs. You can do a couple of things. If you have a very stable group of players, right, where you know that these guys are going to be here in consecutive sessions, then you can just continue a session, right? Find a good stopping point, 3 or 4 encounters in, and then say we'll pick it up here next Tuesday. But if you don't have a very, very stable group, if you're running Adventure League, for example, or if you are running online games where there's a lot of fluidity in who moves in and out, that's not a good choice, because you might have one of your 4 players drops out, or you get a new player or 2 who comes in, and you have to adjust your story to incorporate them mid story. It's just very cumbersome. So this is what I do, and this is what I recommend. You can do things that simulate the effects of a combat, right? And generally, that is going to be what that means is you're going to impose some damage, and you're going to impose some effects, some conditions that are going to require resources to address as well. So, and this is limited only by your imagination, and a lot of people, this is where a lot of people think, oh well, I'll use traps for those, and traps are a good start. The DMG has a lot of traps, and this is actually what made me begin looking in this direction too. However, they really don't do what you're looking for. They are not complete enough, and they are much too constrained in what they can do. So you really have to open up that idea. I'll give you some examples. In the encounter gallery that I put together, I have some harpies, right? And the harpies, leading into their lair, they have all of these infested remains, and those deal damage, right? You fail a Constitution saving throw from this event. And then they will immediately impose a disease effect. I chose a couple from the contagion list in the contagion spell. So coming into the harpy's lair, boom, you got some damage, and then you got an effect. So you're probably looking at if there's a paladin, they can use a couple of lay on hands, maybe 3 or 4 lay on hands to cure people who failed a Constitution saving throw. Someone with lesser restoration available can use spell slots to cure, and then and then in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes, it's like, okay, Constitution saving throws, boom, boom, boom. Here's the effects: damage, damage, damage. You're sick, you're sick, you're sick. Oh, okay, I'll heal. Or I can't heal, so we've just got to carry on with this lingering effect that simulates what would have happened if they had been through a combat. So in the course of 3 or 4 minutes, we have imposed the same effect on the party as if they had gone through a combat. Right? And so what I will do in my typical adventures, if you look at Dimgard, you will see this. I will have usually around 5 or 6 encounters that could be combat, right? But usually at least 2, sometimes as many as 4 of those will be fairly clearly the intent is that the PCs will avoid combat, right? That they will negotiate or sneak or use deception. There will be ways, clearly in the setups, like, oh, okay, you don't have to fight these guys. And this actually is a fairly difficult thing for new players to adjust to Dimgard in, because these are almost every encounter in Dimgard is presented as like, here are these guys. Are you going to fight them? Or are you going like today? Here are these orcs protecting the approach to their camp, and they appear hostile to you coming in. All right, we're going to fight them. Right? Then I had a couple of new players. The people who had played with Dimgard Adventures before is like, well, maybe we want to talk to these guys. It's like, I don't speak orc. I'm attacking. And that's also one reason why today's session went 6 hours instead of 4. But anyway, so anyway, in the Dimgard Adventures, I will have 5 or 6 prepared encounters. Usually 2 to 4 of those will be fairly clear ways that you can avoid combat. You don't have to fight them. But then I will also have prepared 3 to 5 of these other effects, these diseases or environmental effects. Sometimes I will use a role-playing situation that demands resource consumption. Like PCs have to cast spells to help refugees, right? Or they can just let them die and be assholes, right? Which these players aren't going to do. Or there's an NPC who can go either way, and you give him some of your potions, just persuade him. Then so I've got the 3 or 4 quick hitting things that can have the effect of a medium or hard combat, but only are going to take a total of 20 minutes of game time. And then that will leave plenty of time within my 4-hour session for 2 to 3 or 4. 4 is usually pretty pushing it if we're going to do 4 combats. But plenty of time to handle the combats that come out, and still have plenty of room in there for character development and getting the narrative part of the story with interacting with PCs, getting that out and progressing the plot of the heroes. So that's what I do. So to summarize, right? Need to use the adventure day. If you don't use the adventure day, your encounter budgets are going to be wrong. The entire CR system breaks down. So you need to use the gritty realism is an option if you still want to use that week-long. But I do recommend trying to engineer a day because it's very exciting, and I have found it to be a very good thing. Then if you are not going to do that, you probably, and regardless of that, you should probably vary from the rules as written, right, which say you need to use combat encounters, and engineer some effects to simulate combat results, kind of similar to traps, so that you can have the effects of combats that occur in 5 minutes or less, and you can get the activity down to a 4-hour session. All right, so thanks for tuning in. I want to thank my backers for my Kickstarter as well. That comes to a close today, and I will try to get another one of these up within the next week.